My roommate seemed normal until I heard noises under my bed at 3 a.m. What happened next still haunts me. I, 24M, have lived with my roommate Carl, 24M, for 2 years. Looking back now, I can see all the red flags I missed, but at the time, everything seemed normal enough when we first met through a mutual friend, Josh, who vouched for Carl as a reliable tenant. We found this decent 2-bedroom apartment in a somewhat older building near downtown. The rent was reasonable, and the location was perfect, walking distance to my job at a software company and close to Carl's workplace at a local graphic design studio. The first few months were actually pretty good. Carl was clean, paid his rent on time, and seemed to respect boundaries. We weren't close friends, but we could share a pizza and watch a game without it being awkward. A few months into rooming with him, he told me he was pansexual. I said okay, cool. I am not interested in that personal information, nor am I judgmental. I said all right. It came up during a random conversation about dating apps, and I didn't think much of it. It's 2024, after all, and people should feel comfortable being themselves. But things started getting weird gradually. At first, it was subtle, the way he'd linger in the common areas when I was there, or how he'd always managed to time his laundry runs with mine. I noticed he started buying the same brand of coffee I drink, using the same gym I go to, and even got similar shoes to mine. At the time, I chalked it up to coincidence or maybe just picking up on each other's habits from living together. A few times over the last year, he has asked me if I had ever considered experimenting with other men. I said nope. Also, I said I didn't feel comfortable with him asking me such a personal question. The first time it happened, we were both in the kitchen. I was meal prepping for the week, and he was making tea. He tried to play it off casually, like he was just making conversation, but it felt forced and uncomfortable. It's not like we are close friends, we are only roommates by happenstance basically. We barely knew each other outside of sharing living space. Sure, we'd occasionally grab a beer with Josh and some other friends, but our relationship was strictly platonic and primarily focused on apartment-related stuff like utilities and cleaning schedules. Anyway, every time I said this, he basically said we'll see. I was like, what? The way he'd say it always gave me this weird feeling, like he knew something I didn't. But I tried to brush it off, thinking maybe it was just his awkward way of ending an uncomfortable conversation. Looking back, I should have noticed how he started rearranging his schedule to match mine. If I mentioned having a late meeting at work, he'd suddenly need to stay late at his office too. If I ordered takeout, he'd coincidentally be hungry and order from the same place. He even started watching the same shows I watched on Netflix, even though he'd previously said he hated true crime documentaries. Then there were the accidental bathroom encounters. He'd somehow always need to use the bathroom right when I was about to shower, or he'd be brushing his teeth exactly when I needed to get ready for work. I started changing my routine to avoid these encounters, but somehow, he'd adjust his schedule too. The situation with my bedroom door was another thing I initially dismissed. Sometimes I'd come home and find it slightly ajar, even though I always kept it closed. Carl would say he was checking for a gas leak or thought he heard my phone ringing. Once, he claimed he was looking for his cat. We don't even have a cat. I started noticing small things in my room being slightly moved, a drawer not fully closed, my laptop at a slightly different angle, my bed sheets looking slightly disturbed. But every time I tried to bring it up, Carl had some explanation ready. Maybe I moved things in my sleep, or perhaps the building's foundation was settling, causing things to shift. One night, about 4 months ago, I woke up around 2 a.m. feeling like someone was watching me. The room was dark, but I could have sworn I saw a shadow move near my closet. When I turned on the light, nothing was there, and Carl was supposedly fast asleep in his room. I could hear his white noise machine running. I convinced myself it was just my imagination, maybe stress from work getting to me. Anyways, last night I had a horrifying experience. I heard a noise under my bed. It was movement. At first, I thought I was imagining things. But then I heard it again. The sound was subtle, a soft rustling, almost like fabric against carpet. I tried to convince myself it was just the building settling or maybe the neighbors downstairs. I thought, oh God, is it a mouse or a rat or some shit? My God. This was like 3 a.m. My mind started racing through all the possibilities. Maybe it was a raccoon that had somehow gotten in, or maybe some pipes were making weird noises. We'd had issues with mice in the building before, but the landlord had supposedly taken care of it. So I got out of bed and looked under with my phone flashlight. My hands were shaking slightly as I turned on the flashlight app. The blue-white LED light seemed impossibly bright in the darkness of my room. Now this here was the most startling moment of my life. I guess I am lucky because I have never before this moment felt true terror and fear as a physical sensation, but I was completely jolted. There under my bed was my roommate staring wide-eyed at me, and he screeched when I looked under the bed. His eyes were huge, reflecting my phone's light like some kind of nocturnal animal. He was lying on his stomach, wearing what looked like dark-colored pajamas, with his hands crossed under his chin like he was at some kind of demented sleepover. The screech he let out wasn't human, it was this high-pitched, primal sound that probably woke up half the building. I literally thought I was having a heart attack. My chest seized up, and for a moment, I couldn't breathe. My phone slipped from my hands and clattered to the floor, the light spinning crazily around the room like some twisted disco ball. I then just started hearing sorry. My roommate crawled out from under the bed crying, apologizing over and over. He was awkwardly shuffling out on his elbows and knees, still making these horrible sobbing sounds mixed with apologies. His face was streaked with dust bunnies from under my bed, and he had this wild, desperate look in his eyes. I was so creeped out and afraid that I ran out of the apartment in my pajamas. I didn't even grab my phone at first, I just ran. My bare feet slapped against the hallway floor as I bolted down 3 flights of stairs. I could still hear Carl's voice echoing down the stairwell, calling my name and apologizing. It was only when I reached the building's entrance that I realized I had instinctively scooped up my phone from the floor before fleeing. The night air was cold against my skin, I was only wearing sleep shorts and a t-shirt. A few people were still out on the streets, mostly late-night workers and some drunk college students, but nobody seemed to notice or care about the guy running down the street in his pajamas. There was a Dunkin' Donuts that was open 24/7 a few blocks away, so I just sat in there with a decaf and a breakfast sandwich with my heart thundering away. The fluorescent lights and the smell of coffee and donuts were somehow comforting in their normalcy. The tired-looking cashier didn't even blink at my appearance. I guess when you work the graveyard shift at Dunkin', you see all kinds. My roommate kept texting me asking to talk. I ignored it. My phone kept buzzing with messages, each one making me jump slightly. The few other customers in the store, a couple of cab drivers and what looked like a nurse getting off shift, kept giving me concerned looks. In the texts he found a way to horrify me even further. He confessed he had been sleeping under my bed a few nights a week for 3 or 4 months and that he was doing it to get closer to me and psychically saturate each other. The fuck? The messages kept coming, each one more disturbing than the last. He talked about how he could feel my energy while he was under there, how he thought we were spiritually connecting while I slept. Some of the texts went into detail about how he'd carefully time his movements to my breathing patterns, how he'd downloaded a white noise app to mask any sounds he might make, how he'd studied my schedule to know which nights I was most likely to sleep deeply. He even mentioned keeping a journal of his observations. I didn't want to know what that meant. I waited for him to go to work and I ran into the apartment, got my essentials, and left. I knew Carl's schedule by heart, not by choice, but because he'd made sure I knew it. I waited until 8:45 a.m., when I was sure he'd be at his morning team meeting. The apartment felt different now, tainted. I grabbed a duffel bag and stuffed it with clothes, toiletries, my laptop, and important documents. I couldn't bring myself to look under my bed. I am currently crashing with Josh, the mutual friend who'd introduced us. When I told him what happened, he turned pale and admitted that Carl had exhibited similar behavior with his previous roommate, but they'd all written it off as him being quirky and socially awkward. Apparently, the previous roommate had moved out suddenly, citing personal reasons, but hadn't given details. Our lease is up in 1 month, my intention is simply to not renew. Josh offered to let me stay with him until I find a new place, and his girlfriend Sarah has been helping me look for apartments in a completely different part of town. I'm even considering moving to a different city entirely, though that feels like letting Carl win somehow. This dude is blowing up my phone. And I am getting texts from other people, some friends of mine and some bozos who are friends with him. He's apparently joined several local LGBTQ+ support groups and is telling everyone his version of events, how I brutally rejected him and exposed his vulnerable moment. He is going around telling people I shamed him and that I am rejecting his apologies. He's posted crying selfies on Instagram with vague captions about heartbreak and misunderstanding. Some mutual acquaintances have even started a group chat to discuss the situation, sharing screenshots of Carl's social media posts and debating who's in the wrong. Some people are claiming I am overreacting and invalidating his feelings. They're saying I should be more understanding of his unique way of expressing affection and that my reaction was kink shaming. One person even suggested that I attend a sensitivity training workshop to better understand alternative expressions of romance. Most people agree he was improper but think I should work it out with him and give a second chance because he's sensitive. They keep sending me links to articles about communication in shared living spaces and suggesting meditation apps for managing conflict. Someone even offered to facilitate a healing circle for us. Carl has now escalated to sending me lengthy emails detailing his childhood trauma and how this incident has triggered his abandonment issues. He's ceasing our mutual friends on these emails, making it impossible for me to just ignore them. He's even reached out to my sister on Facebook, trying to get her to help him understand what he did wrong. The building manager called me yesterday because Carl had gone to her crying, saying he was worried about my mental health and wanted to do a wellness check. I had to explain the situation to her, and thankfully, she was horrified. She's now helping me break the lease early without penalty and has banned Carl from renewing. I feel like I am losing my mind, and I am seriously 20% convinced I am experiencing a long lucid dream of some sort and wondering if I'm going to wake up or I am in a coma or something because this shit is so insane to me. Like, not really, but maybe really. I mean, what the fuck? Last night, Josh found Carl's journal in my old room while we were getting the rest of my stuff. It was hidden behind my headboard. The contents were worse than we imagined: detailed observations about my sleep patterns, breathing rhythms, and even what I mumbled in my sleep. There were weird drawings too, and something that looked like a homemade floor plan of my bedroom with notes about energy flows and optimal alignment positions. I've started seeing a therapist to deal with the anxiety this whole situation has caused. I jump at every noise now, and I've developed this compulsive need to check under my bed multiple times before sleeping. Josh's guest room bed is on the floor, no under-bed space, and I'm seriously considering keeping that setup in my next place. Carl's latest move was to send a group email to our entire friend circle announcing he's starting a support group for misunderstood roommates and using our situation as a case study. He's even tried to contact my workplace HR department, claiming he needs to resolve our domestic situation. Thankfully, they ignored him. I've started documenting everything in case I need to get a restraining order. The police said they can't do much since he hasn't made any direct threats, but they suggested I keep records of all communication. I've also started carrying pepper spray, just in case. The whole experience has made me question everything about the past 2 years. How many times was he really under there? What else did he do when I was sleeping? Every memory of our time as roommates is now tainted with this creepy new context. Even innocent moments, like him making coffee in the morning or doing laundry, now seem sinister and calculated. Some nights, I lie awake wondering if I'll ever feel completely safe in my own bedroom again. The thought of having another roommate makes my skin crawl, even though I know not everyone is like Carl. Josh keeps telling me I'll laugh about this someday, but right now, it feels like I'm living in some twisted psychological thriller, except I can't just close the book or turn off the movie. The worst part is, Carl seems genuinely confused about why his behavior was wrong. In his latest email, sent to me, our friends, his therapist, and apparently his entire extended family, he compared himself to a guardian angel who was just trying to watch over me. He said he thought of himself as my spiritual protector and that sleeping under my bed was his way of channeling positive energy into my life. I've started looking for jobs in other cities. Maybe a fresh start would be good. Somewhere where nobody knows about the guy who turned my bed into some sort of creepy spiritual portal. Somewhere where I can sleep without wondering if someone's underneath me, taking notes about my breathing patterns. For now, I'm just counting down the days until I can put this whole nightmare behind me. Though I have a feeling this story is going to follow me for a while, it's already becoming one of those you won't believe what happened to my friend stories in our social circle. I just hope my next living situation is boring and normal, with no unexpected roommates in unexpected places. At least I've learned one thing from all this: always check under the bed. And maybe invest in a platform bed with no space underneath. And possibly some motion sensors. And definitely a good therapist.